In a game with so much application to be made, whether it be offensive or defensive, a lot of times in Street Fighter, a lot of us forget that the key to winning consistently can oftentimes come in the form of just playing good defense. So in this video, we're going to go over why defense is your key to winning in Street Fighter 6 and beyond. That being said, if you enjoy educational content like this and want to see more, then be sure as always to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get straight to it. Now, nobody wants to be in the corner. This is a quite obvious point, myself included. But it's all about learning to be patient and controlling your space, even when your space is limited. And being in the corner is really problematic for a lot of players because they tend to lose patience, they tend to get really desperate because they're trying to fight their way out of the corner, but in doing so, they press way too many buttons and they get caught out. So one of the things you have to learn to do is control the space in the game, regardless of how much of it you have. It's important to really understand the ebb and the flow of Street Fighter 6, or just any fighting game in general. When it comes to controlling space, you really are trying to focus on limiting the amount of options your opponent can throw out to punish you. So if you are, say, in the corner, try your best to, of course, just sit there and block and just watch and see what type of patterns, what type of habits your opponent is showing you through their block strings. And then try to look for openings to capitalize and therefore regain all that control. And then once you're in neutral, controlling space is as simple as walking forward, throwing out Hadokens, depending on who you're using, of course, throwing out normals, whiff punishing, and so on and so forth. So defense isn't just about sitting there and blocking all day. Yes, blocking is a part of the defensive aspect of any fighting game, but learning to control the space with your respective character is very, very crucial. And that's because, again, every character is going to operate differently, so you, the player, have to now go into the lab and think of ways to mitigate damage, but also create opportunities along the way. And so defense is really, really imperative when it comes to winning consistently, because it's not just about rushing the opponent down. Because a lot of times players watch these YouTube videos, they watch other top players, and they see that these players are getting away with all of these aggressive, very rushdown centric playstyles, but not really understanding the fundamental aspects of how they're getting there. You see the result and you think that's how you play, but you're forgetting about the process along the way. And the process is really all about, once again, controlling that space, seeing what the enemy wants to do, and playing a strong defensive game where you are just outside of their safe space, where you can then retaliate, you can whiff punish, you can counter poke, and therefore you can now open up the opportunity to be more offensive. So with that being said, hopefully that has given you a little bit of a gist of what I mean when it comes to controlling space and being defensive with it. You can also control space and be offensive, but of course, for the sake of the video, this is more defensive. So keep that in mind when you are playing the game. Think of it as a give and take, more so than you're just taking. Don't be too greedy. You want to try and be a bit conservative. And once the opponent starts to open themselves up to obvious patterns and behavior, then you can apply offensive pressure. So that being said, let's move on to the second point. In a game where there's so much activity happening, it becomes really intimidating and sometimes overwhelming for both players trying to mentally decipher how to engage in combat in real time. Sure, it's easy to watch a replay and pick up on notes and try to apply it to your game, but there is so much more. There are so many more elements to encode, or rather decode, that you need to really sit back and analyze. And so less is more in Street Fighter. And the reason why I say less is more is because as you give your attention to the things that are actually really important, you'll actually do more in the end. So I'll give you an example. Because there is such a high level of mental stack in Street Fighter 6 due to the drive mechanics system, drive impact, drive parry, drive rushing, drive reversals, so on and so forth, tie that with character matchups, there's a lot to really navigate around. But when you try to apply less to your game plan, that is, you go into every single match and you say to yourself, okay, let's focus on drive impacts. We know that most opponents are typically going to want to use this very, very frequently. So let's keep an eye on this and focus our attention on that drive impact. Now, by doing so, you're giving your brain enough time or enough energy to focus naturally on other aspects of your game. Your hit confirms, your whiff punishes, all those things will happen naturally because you're not concentrating so much of your focus on those particular areas. You're only giving your attention towards whether or not that enemy, or your opponent rather, is going to drive impact you. So your mind's going to be really super aware as to when someone drive impacts, and the moment you see that red on the screen, boom, you react and then you apply the pressure right away. And so this is why less is more, because the more you give attention to too many things, the less performance you will apply in your games. And just again, it comes down to mental stack, and you become overwhelmed, you drop your combos, you become too anxious because you're trying to do too many things at once, where your mind really operates at its best when it focuses on less things, because now there's more to engage with, in the sense that your brain is only fixated on an objective, and when that objective is met, then you can do more things afterwards. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of a gist of what I mean and how you can apply that to your game and to be defensive, because in a defensive play style, you really are trying to predict what the enemy wants to do. And when you predict things, it becomes easier for you and your brain to respond to things accordingly, as opposed to just guessing things. And where guessing is applied, you're trying to do more things than you should, and that's not really healthy for you. So try to apply less into your games, have an objective, have a simple core fundamental game plan, and then as you continue to see more and more patterns, you can apply pressure moving forward. So that being said, let's move on to the last and final point. So the last point that I want to try to emphasize here is staying grounded. Now, why is this important? Staying grounded isn't just necessarily pertaining to that of playing good ground game, hit confirming and strong neutral game footsies. Staying grounded could also pertain to your mental game, because at the end of the day, Street Fighter is all about psychology. It's all about trying to adapt, apply pressure, make the reads, and essentially make better plays than your opponent. And so staying grounded is really all about trying to maintain a disciplined mind, being focused on your objectives and knowing what those objectives are to reach your final destination. Now, sometimes that destination will take quite a bit of time to get there, but as long as you continue to apply discipline and you are consistent about it, you will eventually get there. Now, of course, staying grounded does apply to playing strong footsies and neutral game, because that really is what Street Fighter is at its core. So you want to be able to hit confirm and whiff punish and counter poke and anti-air, but also air to air. All these things can be applied to your ground game, and so staying grounded really is trying not to become too predictable and too impatient to the point where you're jumping in too carelessly, you're making mindless errors when you should really just be thinking about staying in control and being grounded. Because when you're grounded, you get a better idea and observation as to what the enemy is trying to do to you. you're becoming more and more active in the sense that mentally, as I mentioned before in the previous point, you're taking less of the stacks, the mental stacks off of you, and you have an objective in front of you. And that objective is, I'm going to focus on being grounded in this game. I'm going to focus on my neutral. I'm going to play as much footsies as I can. And therefore, because I'm more grounded, I can therefore react and respond accordingly to when my opponent wants to jump in. Because if you're always jumping in and they're always jumping in, then it becomes this whole unpredictable matchup where you don't know what's going on. But if you already have the objective as in, I'm going to remain in control of the ground, and if they jump, I'm already grounded, so therefore I know how to respond to their actions. So this really comes down to, once again, applying consistent application of just watching your own replays, studying them carefully, and just seeing where you are going wrong. Everyone has bad habits, myself included. And as you learn, it's just important to apply more and more of what you're learning into your game, and therefore you can be more consistent down the road. So hopefully all of these little bits have given you some advice as to how to apply control in Street Fighter. Remember, it is all psychological. Sure, there are a lot of buttons to press and matchups to learn, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to your mindset. And as long as you are grounded in your mindset and you apply things over time and you're patient with your growth, you will therefore see the results you desire and in the end win more consistently. All that being said, thank you again, you warriors, for tuning in. If you've made it this far, then be sure as always to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you folks on the next video. Stay strong and keep fighting. Peace.